What's up, guys? This is Dedrian Colon. This is random, and I am going to be reviewing whew, Spider-Man No Way Home. Man, that movie, ooh boy. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Just a side note, I am going to be mentioning some spoilers in this movie. Man, this was a really, really good Spider-Man movie. I would say, man, it's probably going to go down as one of the best Spider-Man movies of all time. Man, it the way it started off, the way it just continued throughout the film, and then the ending, it was a beautiful orchestra and everything. Shout out to Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire. And yes, I just gave away some spoilers right there. But we'll jump into it. But man, this movie starts off right away from the last film with Jake Gyllenhaal and Magneto, um, pretty much revealing Spider-Man's identity, and he's just, oh my god, the news is broadcasting and everything. Um, MJ and Ned, they're just like, what? They're freaking out and everything, and everyone in the cities, hey, are you his girlfriend? You his girlfriend? That was pretty interesting how they displayed that on screen. Just how hectic it was for his identity being revealed, and how, because of his identity being revealed, a lot of accusations with the oh my god, the droids that killed a bunch of people in the previous film. How that happened and everything, and so he has these charges, and because MJ and Ned are associated with them, all three are looking to get into a uh, university, and the university doesn't want anything to do with them because their association with Spider-Man, which right off the bat, I loved how they set the tone of what the foundation of the movie, what it was about, and just some good stuff. Some good meaty stuff. Sometimes some movies, comic movies, they just go right away to a basic premise and then they go into it. But this one really laid the groundwork for what we would see later on in the film. So, um, Spider-Man, Tom Holland, he goes to Doctor Strange and he's like, hey, my friends can't get into college because of me. I'm affecting everyone's lives in a negative way. I just want to go back to before everything happened where they revealed my identity. So he talks to Doctor Strange and everything, and Doctor Strange is like, okay, let's do the spell. So as Doctor Strange is doing the spell, Spider Man, Tom Holland, keeps asking for different things, and he's tweaking and he's kind of disturbing the spell. And Doctor Strange is like, hey, you can't keep doing this because you're going to throw it off. And what we're doing, I'm not so much can control this of what the ramifications of what's going to happen. Tom Holland, Spider Man, he's still Peter Parker. He's still talking and talking and talking, and before you know it, something happened. A box came out, and so he's like, "All right, cool." And all of a sudden, after that, oh yeah. So after that, that's when all of the villains. So you get Doctor Ock, Octopus, and the way they brought him in to the film was pretty cool because Spider-Man, Tom Holland, he's trying to uh, persuade the Chancellor to, let them in. He's a good person, blah blah blah. And Doctor Octopus comes in and he destroys a strip of the freeway, and he's going after him, and they're fighting and everything. And mind you, Doctor Octopus from Spider-Man 2, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, he's fighting with him and everything, and then before you know it, he has him against the wall, and he pulls off his mask, and he's like, "You're not Peter Parker." He's like, "What? What? You're not Peter Parker." So that's where everything started rolling. Where Peter Parker, Tom Holland, starts saying like, "Uh oh, Is this is one? Is there more coming? And before you know it, you had what was it? You had Green Goblin come in. Then you had uh, the Lizard. You had Electro, Sandman, and mind you, all those villains are there. And what was interesting about this uh, how they transitioned to the next, how they advance the storyline. Um, Again, Peter Parker and Doctor Strange makes it, several references to this that, I got to remind myself that you're a kid. And Peter Parker, he kind of lets his heart get in the way and not think like, hey, if I'm getting these villains from other universes, and Doctor Strange goes into the multiverse, like, hey, you know, you're gonna bring more to this. We need to end this. And uh, Tom Holland's very adamant. He's like, no, maybe we could change them. Maybe we can reverse before they became villains. Um, that was, it's like, ooh, I don't think you should do that, man. This is gonna be not so good. So the next part of the movie, after they, uh, Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, Tom Holland start discussing that and everything. So now they're working towards reversing um, their evilness. Basically, you could say that reversing their evilness and stuff like that. And Doctor Strange tells them you cannot change them. You can't change them. The more you try to change them, the more you're going to make it worse. That I thought was a pretty cool line. Um, and what else was there? Yeah, you can't change them. So Spider-Man, he's Tom Holland. He's working, trying to fix them and everything. And they go to, oh my God, Harry Hogan's home because that he got involved because him and Aunt May broke up in the beginning of the film. So they're at his place, and you have Electro, you have yeah, you got Sandman, you got Lizard, you have Green Goblin, you got Doctor Ock. So they're all there and they're talking and everything, and that's when the movie shifted where it's like, something's off. Something is off, and before you know it, Green Goblin, he just starts coming out, and before you know it, Electro, and good shout out to Jamie Foxx. He did a really good um, job in this film, and he starts getting magnets, just electricity. All of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. More chaos. So in the beginning of the film, you get all this chaos from the aftermath of Peter Parker's identity being revealed. Then you get the chaos of the villains coming in. Now you get the chaos of the villains snapping. And that takes the film to a whole nother level where they're just fighting and everything. And this is where we get to the point where it's Green Goblin and Tom Holland Spider-Man, and they're fighting, and Green Goblin's jet kind of like spears Aunt May, and she gets up, and you can see there's, she's wobbling and everything, and this part of the film, I will tell you, you will, when you see it, you will shed a tear. It will get to you. It's very emotional. It's like, oh no, 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 no. So once that happens, Peter Parker's talking to her, and then she just stops talking. And then Harry Hogan pulls up, and he sees Tom Holland, Peter Parker, crying, and he just starts crying, and then that's when all the FBI and all of them come and they arrest Harry Hogan and everything, and he tells Peter Parker, leave, 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 leave. And then that's when the good stuff happens. So you have MJ and Ned, they're at his place, and he wound up taking Doctor Strange's ring earlier when they were meeting with the when they had all the villains locked up. When Doctor Strange and Peter Parker was discussing the severity of, you know, this multiverse. So Ned, he does the whole thing and he's trying to, man, how do I call this? Peter Parker, come back. So he does it. The ring opens up and Spider-Man comes through and you're like, oh, cool, it's Spider-Man. And he takes off his mask and no, it is not Tom Holland's Spider-Man. It is Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. And they're like, you're not Peter Parker? He's like, yeah, I am Peter Parker. No, you're not. So they run a few tests and everything. He jumps on the wall, he crawls and everything. His mom's like, hey, can you have him get rid of the cobwebs in the ceiling? So she swats it off, or he swats it off. And MJ looks at Ned like, hey, can we get Peter Parker, Tom Holland? Like, hey, can we get him? So he does it again, and before you know it, we get Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. So yes, in this film, you have Tobey Maguire, Peter Parker Spider-Man, you have Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and you have Tom Holland's Spider-Man. And this is where I gotta say, this film did a really good job of just taking the film to another level, where you start off with Peter Parker, his identity being revealed, then him wanting to change, go back in time and change it. Then you introduce the villains from the multiverse. Then you have the big fight with all the villains. Then you bring in the two Spider-Men from the previous films or multiverse in the film. And that was, oh man, it was so good. Oh man, this was so good. I personally wish they would have had more screen time with all three Spider-Man because it was so cool. And the references from each film, like if you've watched all the Spider-Man films, you're going to get it. You're going to get it. Tobey Maguire is talking about how he lost someone in Ben. Andrew Garfield is talking about someone he lost, MJ. And Tom Holland, he's talking about, who he lost. That was so cool. It was one of those things you're like, whoa, this is really happening. There's a scene where they're in some laboratory and they're all working together, and it's a funny scene because Ned, he's monitoring something. He's like, hey, Peter Parker, and they're all three like, which one? The Spider-Man. Which one? The one by the computer. Oh, okay. And it was really cool because there you could. It almost feels like when they're talking to each other, you can relive like the experiences they had in each film, and it's there, and it was so cool. And it was what was also cool about it was that the way they portrayed them on screen in the story, that each Spider-Man wasn't trying to outdo each other. There was like an empathy and compassion for each other, where it's like, I know where you're coming from. And when one said, oh, I'm where, I got it bad, like, no, you don't have a bad, you're this. That was pretty cool. But once that happened, what made this movie really cool was when all three Spider-Men were working together to take down all the villains and take them back in time and everything. And that was so cool. The fight scenes, me describing it does it no justice. It was so cool. Just the teamwork that all three Spider-Man had displayed was phenomenal. It's fun. Again, this film, I recommend it because it is fun. From there, you had all three Spider-Men. They're discussing other villains that they've had, and they're like, oh man, it's pretty cool. But yeah, that fight scene was pretty dope. Once they start fighting, and they're taking them down, then Doctor Strange, he comes, he arrives through the portal because Ned, all chaos is, so he does the circle thing, and Ned is Like, oh man, and Doctor Strange like, oh, you have magic. Oh, that's cool. So Doctor Strange, he's doing a spell to like control everything, but before he can do that, like he sees that things are getting worse and worse, and he tells Peter Parker, Tom Holland, he's like, hey, we hey, this isn't like we got to do something. And Peter Parker, Tom Holland, he looks at Doctor Strange and he tells him, just go back to when no one remembers me. Oh, and Doctor Strange, he's like, are you sure? No one is going to remember you. No one that you love, your close ones, MJ, Ned, they're not going to remember you. And he's like, as long as no one is affected from my decisions, do it. From there, you just see the villains disappear, and then this is a moment that's kind of like, this is why I wish they would have had more screen time with the other two Spider-Men, because you see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield after the villains, you know, disappear and everything. You just see them look at each other and they're just like, and they just go back to their different universes. And then as that's happening, Peter Parker, Tom Holland, he looks at MJ and Ed and he's like, after this, you're not going to remember me. And they start crying. And of course, it's if you watch the other two films, it's gonna hit you because you're just like, oh man, no, no, like no, we don't want this. And MJ and Tom Holland, the Peter Parker, Spider-Man, they kiss and everything, and Doctor Strange does his thing, and boom, they go back. And before the movie ends, Peter Parker's walking down the street, and he goes to the cafe that MJ works at, and it's right around the same time when they were looking to receive news early in their film as far as um, their acceptance to a college, to the university and everything. And he walks in, and MJ's working there, and Ned's sitting at the counter, and Ned and MJ are talking, and she looks at him. She's like, "Hey, can I help you?" And he's like, "Yeah, let me get such and such coffee." And he has this note that he wrote to explain to them, "Hey, this is what happened and everything." And he keeps looking at MJ, and there's subtle moments where he's kind of like giving away, like he knows, what they're involved in, but he doesn't know. Like he doesn't want to tell them fully. And MJ looks at him and he's like, "Is there anything else I can do for you?" And he's like, "No, no, that's good." And she looks at him because during their conversation, he's mentioning uh, things that get to her, and she's kind of like taken aback, but not like, oh my god, concerned, but more like intrigued, like, man, how does this guy know me? And then that's when the film ends. But yeah, I recommend this film. It is a watch. It is a must. It is fun. Um, it is a great adventure film, and it keeps building and building. It's not a bad film by no stretch at all. It is not a bad film. It is a great film. You're gonna probably shed some tears in some moments, and then, man, the moment for me through this film is when all three Spider-Man are interacting. For that, what is it, maybe 5 minutes or so, 5-7 minutes on screen, whether it was in the lab that they were working with or on top of the Statue of Liberty, just the conversation that they had. And man, again, it was so cool because they're talking about stuff that we've seen in the previous films. So it's like all these things are coming together. Like, man, this is so cool. And I mean, if you're a Spider-Man fan, you're gonna love this film, and I recommend it. It is fun. You will enjoy it. Um, we don't know what's gonna happen in the future with, the Spider-Man, but man, shout out to Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire, for doing. Man, this was so much fun. This was so much fun. It almost felt like it was a culmination of the first Spider-Man film in 2002 and Andrew Garfield's Spider. It was just a culmination of all those Spider-Man films come together, and man, it was so good. Shout out to Marvel, that was dope. So yes, that is my review for Spider-Man No Way Home. Like, subscribe, follow this YouTube channel. I will be posting more content like this on this channel, so thank you guys. But yeah, Spider-Man No Way Home, that is a must see. Peace out.